So, without further ado, please let me introduce Professor Sid Newton from UTS to begin the presentation. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Serena, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sidney Newton. Welcome to the Participant Project Update. Today, we'll provide some background to the project, present some key findings, and discuss our plans for the future. To begin with, Simon would like to say a few words about John Moxon. Simon.
Thanks very much. Simon Darcy, I'm part of the research team, but I've been a member of both PDCN and Spinal Cord Injuries Australia, previously AQA, for many years, where I was fortunate enough to come under the spell of John Moxon. John's photographed here by Serena entering a bathroom, which is quite to do with what we're talking about today. In a walking tour of Parramatta that became his post-retirement stamping ground. John acquired his spinal cord injury following a car racing accident in 1970, which was an extension of his engineering career. John was an intensely curious person, a solution seeker, and became a colleague, friend, confidant, and before the term was in common use, a mentor of the first order. Evidence-based policy advocacy was his mantra with PDCN. But as he told me, sometimes you've got to break eggs to make a cake. And one of my fondest memories was being on the streets with John as part of a major street protest to support Scarlett Finney, a young girl who just wanted to go to school with her friends. On the day of the federal court decision of the Scarlett Finney case versus Baulkham Hills Grammar, and the disability movement in New South Wales flooded the streets. A fantastic memory. Today is certainly about research and evidence-based policy that John loves so much through good scholarship and strategy for social change. So with those few words just to celebrate John's life, thank you, and we now move on to the research seminar.
Well, thank you, Simon. Along with our other academic colleague, Philippa, we are the research leads from UTS. We did wish to acknowledge the very positive engagement with Physical Disability Council New South Wales and Spinal Cord Injuries Australia. And I'd like to invite first Diane Lucas, CEO of SCIA, and then Serena Ovens, CEO of PDCN, to say a few words. Diane.
Thank you. I just wanted to highlight how fantastic it's been to be part of this research project. I think one of the things Susie who has been leading it for us, has said that it's one of the best practice models of collaboration, engagement, supporting people with disabilities to participate in the scheme, in this project. So it's been a fantastic project to be part of. It's obviously a very, very important issue. And something that is so important for obviously everyday living, as well as the ability to be out and about and to be able to live your life and not have to worry about something that it should be available wherever you go. So I'm really excited to be part of it and looking forward to the discussion today and the findings.
Thank you, Diane. Serena?
Thanks, Sid. So again, as you know, I'm Serena. I'm the CEO of the Physical Disability Council. For those that may not know us, PDCN is the peak body for people with physical disability in New South Wales. Our core work is to achieve equity for people with physical disability and ensure their full participation in New South Wales society. And we do this mainly through systemic advocacy. We're a member-based organisation, so if you're not a member, please think about joining us, and I'll get Hides to pop the link in the chat for you as well. Membership is free for people with physical disability, and your voice, experiences and opinions are the base for PDCN's prioritising the work we do to achieve inclusive change. Today, I really like to take this opportunity to thank the UTS team for the opportunity to partner with them on what is still a major barrier to participation for many, access to accessible bathrooms. It's been a pleasure to work with Sid, Simon, Philippa, Barbara and the team, and alongside of Spinal Cord Injuries Australia, particularly Susie, who's done so much of the work there for them. And I'm eager as you to find out about the research and what it's found and the next steps to using this data to enact change. Lastly, can I thank the more than 100 participants from PDCN who spent time inputting to the research project, providing your valuable personal experiences ensure that rich, detailed data makes a significant difference in the long run. So thank you.
And I thank you both so much for your collaboration in making this pilot project such a success. We've also benefited greatly from the enthusiastic and expert support provided by Farah Madden and Mark Relf in particular. You'll also note that we've been most ably assisted by our wonderful team of researchers. The necessary funding to undertake this work has been generously provided by UTS. And of course, the work relied heavily on the participation of you, the wheelchair user community. We're especially proud of the number of project participants, highlighted here with an asterisk, who have direct lived experience of wheelchair use. Welcome, everyone. Now, there should be no need to convince wheelchair users as to the significance of accessible bathrooms. There is, however, a real barrier, and that is the accessible bathroom use of necessity remains a relatively private exercise. It is something not often considered by the broader community, but it is, as you have made abundantly clear in this project, a very significant issue if you are a wheelchair user. My colleagues and I were originally approached by Mark Relf to help him push to improve the current Australian design standards for accessible bathrooms. Those standards generally set minimum standards, and that minimum standard tends to be what designers then specify. But minimum specification actively discourages bathroom innovation and tends to produce unsatisfactory outcomes, for perhaps the majority of wheelchair users. Minimum standards also tend to set the level of funding allocated to accessible bathrooms, meaning, again, inadequate provisions for some, unsuitable or indeed unnecessary provisions for others. At that stage, of course, we get into having to retrofit bathrooms, which everyone accepts is a very expensive option. So best to try and get it right in the first place. Finally, when you look at the evidence base for the current standards, they are based largely on research from the 1970s and 1980s. Those studies were narrowly focused on the scientific measurement of body sizes and physical abilities with groups of just a few dozen participants. In the decades since, much has changed about the people who use mobility devices, how they use bathrooms, the mobility devices themselves, and the bathroom products available. Yet the evidence base for the standards has not changed. The evidence base has not changed in Australia. In fact, it has not changed globally. Our motivation here is that robust, empirical and lived experience data of contemporary bathroom use will greatly strengthen the case for changes to the Australian standards. First and foremost, this was a pilot project aimed at demonstrating the feasibility and benefits of working in close collaboration with the community of wheelchair users. It aimed to be inclusive because lived experience is so vital to understanding how people actually experience accessible bathrooms. It aimed to be embodied because experience is a complex phenomenon. Experience is directly impacted by our perceptions, our emotions, our physiology, and our agency. In other words, to understand experience, we need to combine multiple lenses. How are users predisposed to bathrooms? How do they react to particular bathroom settings? What are their motivations? For those complementary lenses, we require multiple and complementary research methods. So we have combined a questionnaire survey that asks quite specific things of many people, along with field studies that reveal new aspects of actual use, along with interviews that probe in more depth and explore some of the important nuances to accessible bathroom use. We would like to briefly review each of those quite separate but intentionally complementary studies. So, firstly with the online survey, and starting with Simon, over to you.
Thank you very much. Remembering to press the mute button again. We carried out an online survey, but most importantly, and I am a person who's a power wheelchair user, have been for almost 40 years now. We got together a team that included academics and industry experts, as we said, Mark Ralph and Farah Madden, both experienced people on the Australian Standards Committee. And we then also engaged others from those that we know from the community. And we had 20 people test the co-designed questionnaire. We were able to build in the comments from power wheelchair users, manual wheelchair users, others who used other forms of mobility aids before we launched the final survey. That survey produced 209 completed responses, and without going into a stats session, we collected a series of descriptive statistics as well as inferential that look at between group differences. So if I could come over to the next slide, please. So just some 94% were completed by people with disability, the other 6% completed by significant others, for example, parents or attendants that were assisting. It was across support needs from independent users through to those with very high support needs. The daily mobility aids, and this was a multi-response question, so it totals over 100. 60% power wheelchair users, 55% manual wheelchair users, scooters, walking frames, and lower limb prosthetics. The age range spanned 60 years from 20 to 80, and 55% were male and 44% female, 1% identifying as non-binary. So the stats results really showed that there was a older respondent preference for grab rails, given that disability significantly increases with age. The higher the support needs, the more space that was required. And so this idea of the footprint, wheelchair footprint, coming from the 1970s and 80s, where all chairs, including power chairs, were much smaller. And there was also a preference for those that transferred. So if we go to the next slide, Sid. So the first stat, press the button again, is 8% had a left-hand preference. Next, 16% for right hand. Next, 33% with no preference and could use both. But 43% did not transfer while using the public bathrooms. Coming over, Sid, to the next slide. So what did the survey results reveal? Well, one, public accessible bathrooms are often avoided due to issues of access. There's a major issue to do with manual door opening due to the strength required to open, and many weren't compliant with that strength. Automatic doors were not available at most places. There's a whole series of issues to do with privacy, locks and security of bathroom doors, a lack of space to move around within, particularly where you've got a particular side preference to be able to use the various facilities, and backrests and grab rails are contentious. Philippa will talk more about the qualitative findings, but just to tell you on the survey, the open-ended responses generated 27,000 words of qualitative comments from the just over 200 users. I'm going to hand back to Sid that's going to put the T, technology, into this University of Technology study?
Oh, thanks, Simon. So where the online survey successfully produced statistically significant empirical evidence, the field study is more about experimental. Experimental in the sense that we're looking to develop and test a range of exciting and often entirely novel digital technologies. We aim to apply these emerging technologies collectively to better understand how people experience the built environment. And this is our entire laboratory that fits with ease into a regular backpack. It comprises a discrete 360 video camera, A, an iPad Pro with onboard laser scanner, B, an audio recorder with remote lapel mic capability, C, a wristband device that measures various biometric markers, D, and the latest in eye tracking glasses that video record whatever the wearer is looking at E. We then have a suite of sophisticated software that enables us to synchronize and analyze all of the data from each of the devices recorded over time. The 360 camera records images in every direction at the same time. You can see what a 360 image looks like when projected onto a two-dimensional plane in the bottom left corner. However, using specialized apps, we can then play that image or video back and view it as a single field of view. Drag the cursor to move our field of view around the space, even zoom in and out, all in high resolution. The laser scanner in the iPad creates what is called a point cloud of any given room. The point cloud measures the dimensions of every surface in the space with millimeter accuracy. From the correctly dimensioned representation, we can directly create an accurate 3D CAD model. From the CAD model, we can produce scaled drawings of plans, elevations, sections that capture the actual layout of the room, with all fittings correctly located and scaled. We can then overlay on each individual bathroom some of the critical requirements of the current standards. In purple, clear space around the toilet pan, the required location of toilet flushing mechanisms, the required location of toilet roll dispenser points, etc. The drawings then highlight where the actual bathroom layout may not be satisfying the current standards. In this case, the toilet paper is presented from the base of the toilet roll mechanism, and therefore outside the purple zone that defines what is required by the standards. The same iPad laser scanner can also be used to track its own movements through space. So here, the red line represents the iPad, which we attach to the rear of each wheelchair for the duration of the simulated bathroom use. Each participant then simulates how they would use that particular bathroom, including any maneuvering, transfer, procedures, hygiene, etc. The iPad remains attached to the wheelchair for the duration. This simulation then shows how the movement of the iPad, represented by the red line, is tracked through the space and recorded. Using specialist software, we can attach a scaled representation of the particular wheelchair model to the iPad as it moves through the space, taking the wheelchair with it. In this way, we're able to replay the actual movement of the wheelchair for each participant as well. The lapel mic records the comments of each participant in real time. The audio can then be transcribed and time-stamped for analysis. The biometric wristband records medical-grade, high-resolution, and that's 60 data points per second, readings of blood pulse volume, body temperature, hand movement, and electrodermal activity, all of which offer a unique window into the emotional and physical state of an individual as they experience the bathroom setting. At the same time, the eye tracking glasses are video recording what the user is observing, and tiny sensors in the glasses track the pupil movement to determine the precise point of focus within the view. Finally, we have a suite of incredible software that provides a wealth of visualization and data analysis options. This is where the rubber hits the road. Never before has such a rich combination of synchronized data been applied in this way. The 360 images can be played in virtual reality headsets, so we can place users, designers, or researchers right there in the room for auditing and training. The CAD models can be interrogated to extract actual dimensions and to check compliance with key parts of the standards. The wheelchair tracking is perhaps the most novel of our technologies, and we're still exploring the potential it offers to analyze wheelchair and wheelchair user movements, to study clearances, positions, maneuverability, alternative wheelchair designs, etc. All of this information is accurately synchronized and time-stamped. The software will automatically generate heat maps of what each participant has focused attention on, or average multiple heat maps for multiple users. The analysis software can also sequence the areas of attention to determine the order in which participants visually interrogate the space. Combined, we get objective data on compliance, movement, attention, and reactions. This is truly game-changing capability, and all of the technology fits into a small backpack, meaning it is highly portable, quick to set up, and easy to transport into bathrooms across the country. So what have we learned from the field studies this far? Some key points. First up, nobody in our studies touched the grab rails. When required, it is the toilet seat that provides the critical anchor point. Of course, when you audit 2021 accessible bathrooms, as we now have, you very quickly note that many toilet seats are unstable, poorly maintained, and loose-fitting. With the 360-degree images, you can observe the lack of storage space for medical and other required procedures, the lack of general waste bins, and no specialist bins for medical waste. Our CAD models reveal the impact of adopting the same extra-large toilet roll dispensers in accessible toilets as in bathrooms more generally. In accessible bathrooms, the grab rails compete for the same wall space as the toilet roll dispenser mechanism. The participant commentary recordings voice concerns with the provision of backrests. Biometrics highlight which design features cause the most concern for users. For example, in our study, it is the Dyson-style above-access hand dryers as a particular case in point. Eye tracking shows an almost universal and habitual concern with the locking mechanism of the entrance door. We do have many other insights from our field studies, but at this stage, with only 10 participants involved, the results are more about a proof of concept and potential than they are about drawing strong conclusions. With that, I'll now pass over to Philippa to present our interview process. Philippa.
Thank you, Sid, and thanks everyone for attending today. As you can see, the survey and the field studies are so exciting for their scalability as much as the technology that's being used. But also this part of the project, this next part that I'll be talking about today is the qualitative or more in-depth part of the project. I had the privilege of speaking with everyone who completed their field study with SID and got to have this really rich discussions that explored how people interact with accessible bathrooms, how they experience all of the different elements within the bathroom, what they liked and what they didn't like. And we were able to recruit 6 participants from PDCN and 6 from SCIA. We conducted one-on-one interviews. I'd like to thank all the participants who spent time with me, up to an hour each. And we recorded and transcribed those. And they're being thematically analysed as we speak. So what I'm going to be talking to you today is some of the preliminary findings from that. We were lucky to have a diversity of lived experience, a range of different types of wheelchairs that people are using, as well as catheterisation and non-catheterisation within our interviews. Sid, if you'd like to go to the next slide. Some of the emerging themes that we found, there's the sheer diversity of use, the different ways that people interact with all of the different elements that we find within accessible bathrooms, and people's preferences, and the role that, how people's unique lived experiences will inform directly how they interact with all of the items within an accessible bathroom. And some of the features that we would talk about were, of course, the toilet is front and centre, but also toilet paper use preferences, how hand washing and hand drying preferences, the types of grab rails that people use, and also entrance, security, door locks, and layout. What was particularly interesting is the way that people talked about avoiding public bathrooms altogether, and if they're aware of a particularly poorly maintained public bathroom, the role that hygiene plays in whether or not people will interact with public bathrooms, of course, but also if they're not avoiding, the amount of preparation, the need for preparedness and planning, perhaps to know where the bathrooms are, but also when you're using the different designs of bathrooms, the order of accessing paper, where to put catheterisation equipment, etc., is something that we talked about a lot. And I think really interesting me is the variety of risks and safety issues that came out, the risks that people take by simply using an accessible bathroom, and the role that design plays there in mitigating those risks or accentuating those risks. Hygiene. Who can talk about public bathrooms without talking about hygiene? Everyone's been in one of those absolutely revolting, disastrous bathrooms that we don't have to interact with. And we had so many stories of people who, are forced to get quite close and to the bowl of the toilet that, we really don't want to be our faces don't want to be close to, our bodies being close to. So we highlighted just how critical maintenance of bathroom is and how often it's not done well. The other theme that came up is the role of privacy and dignity, and the role that design plays. Automatic locks that were particularly sensitive and would open when people were in the middle of using them. And I think what was great to talk about too are people's pet peeves. What do people really not like in accessible bathrooms, as well as all of the design features that are working really well for people. Can you go to the next slide? Thanks, Slid. So I've chosen just a couple of themes that have come out of the interviews that we conducted, and given you a few examples of some of the quotes that have come out. I think something that's not talked about a lot is catheter use, and how the range of catheter use will define how people interact with a toilet, whether people transfer in order to use a catheter, whether they don't need to transfer. And the importance of storage, sterile storage areas and disposal areas in the bathroom. And you can see that, of course, the risks that people take when a toilet is not clean. A person on the screen, one person's quote here is, "My pet peeves when toilets are not clean. Our faces and bodies have to get really close to the toilet bowl with a catheter." And one of the other quotes here is "People assume because I catheterise that I don't actually get on the toilet. Well, I've gotten on the toilet every single time for over 25 years. So the sheer diversity of use is something that I think is, it does present a design challenge, but it's so important to have an understanding of how people actually use these spaces and the equipment that they're using in these spaces in order to design better. Sid, could you go to the next slide? Thank you. Of course, another really important part of our conversations was toilet transferring for people who did transfer. And again, as Sid mentioned, the fact that that toilet seat really effectively becomes another grab rail within the space, and how some of those are often not secured properly. And some of you may not be surprised that that backrest comes up as a point of conversation for many of the participants. Particularly for people who transfer onto the toilet and use a catheter, because it seems to push people far forward, which can increase the risk of overbalancing and needing that space to actually access, in front of themselves while they're on the toilet. And the height of toilet bowls, what works for some people doesn't work for other people, and that there's a real variety of toilet heights that people find within accessible bathrooms that presented a challenge. Thanks, Sid. Could you go to the next slide? I'd like to talk a little bit about the risks that people take when they are in their day-to-day use of accessible toilets. Some people may not have a brake on their wheelchair, and of course, the gradient in a bathroom floor can mean that they have to be very, very careful and have their hands on the chair at all times. The mounting of that toilet paper holder that Sid also mentioned, quite a few people mentioned that by the time when you reach down to actually access the toilet paper, people are risking falling onto the floor because it's so low, and because their centre of gravity is placed, away from the toilet itself. And also when using those toilet seats and grabbing onto them, they can be sharp on the edges, preventing people from getting a really good grip, and that can risk people's stability. And that's falling off that toilet or ending up on the floor is a really significant risk. Can you go to the next slide, Sid? I think that might be up to you now. Yes, I'll go back to you now, Sid. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Philippa. But we began our presentation today by noting how bathroom use is something that typically gets hidden behind closed doors and is a private experience for most of us. But that also means it is rarely discussed, and the majority of the population will have never even ventured inside an accessible bathroom. The significance of that is it's difficult to empathise with a problem when you have no personal experience of that problem. So what we want to do is to leverage the findings of this pilot project to both educate and provoke. In addition to the empirical data from the survey, the variety of visualizations from our field studies, and the telling voices of lived experience, we are producing a series of graphic illustrations to help communicate the messages overall. We will write for the conversation, for professional publications, and advocate with government, agencies, and the various standards committees. It's about shining a timely and focused light on this much neglected but significant aspect of accessing the built environment. So where to next? Where do we take the project, the collaborations, the industry support, and your participation from here? Absolutely, in the coming months, we aim to translate our findings from your participation into articles and visual resources particular to wheelchair use of public accessible bathrooms, full stop. That said, however, all along we have been advised that the most pressing need is for empirical data particular to domestic and residential settings. The current design standards for accessible bathrooms are especially poorly served with data from domestic settings. The multi-method approach we've developed, including the portable technologies, now makes empirical study of domestic settings entirely feasible. Along with accessible bathrooms, of course, there are many other elements of the built environment that warrant the form of inclusive and embodied research approach we have demonstrated in this pilot project. Kitchens, entrances, showers, indeed every room in every type of building, homes, hotels, schools, hospitals, aged care. All would benefit from a mixed method and inclusive approach similar to what has been developed and employed in this pilot project. Similarly, as well as wheelchair access, other access issues could and should be investigated. Other mobility issues, visual impairment, aging. We all experience the built environment in different ways. However, as this pilot study demonstrates, we can now begin to reveal more and more about how different those experiences can be. We can use emerging technologies to complement traditional modes of investigation. Take our research instruments out into the community and into authentic user settings. Involve the community, not just as study subjects, but as meaningful members of the research team. We do hope you consider this pilot project as taken an important step in the right direction, and we very much thank you all once again for your willing participation and encouraging support. Thank you. We did think that we would like to have a small poll of the audience, and so there's a little provocative quote there. I no longer use public toilets, so sometimes I just go out to things. I just don't go out to things. And so there's a poll now available to you to ask if you've ever avoided a social situation because you could not find a suitable, accessible bathroom. So if you'd like to just respond to that as we go through, we can now open the floor to any questions or comments, please.
Yeah. I've got something.
So I can see Kara's got her hand up. Kara, do you want to go?
Hi, thanks for inviting me here today. It was great to participate in this project. I just have a question. Obviously, we have heard and that there are a lot of different preferences. Would there ever be, like, I guess, a push for multiple options? So, for example, not just to have the flush button behind you, but also have the flush button behind you, but also have like a lever on the side, or different positions for the toilet paper, say one beside you a bit higher, one this side, you know, on a general level. I mean, would that ever be an option?
Well, I think the question of what options there may be will come down to funding and standards determination. So we don't determine the standards, but we can help influence and advise and promote changes to those standards. And what we're trying to do is to develop an empirical data set that we can use to convince the standards committees and others that those sorts of changes are appropriate. And so there's a raft of different possibilities that we can go back to the standards committees with. The strongest ones will be whatever the current empirical evidence we have supports. And if in future we have further evidence that supports multiple options, as you indicate, then obviously that's something that we'll also seek to promote.
Sure.
There's a couple of comments in the chat. Sid, Ali Robertson's suggested that we need more changing place toilets.
Well, again, you know, there's a range of different requirements that we can look for. And certainly in the audit that we've done of 21 different bathroom settings, there were very minimal changing places available within those set. But until or unless we can do a more comprehensive study of what kind of level of availability there is, or lack of availability, which I'm sure will be the case, the changing places are an additional option. So again, I don't want to set the expectations too high for this project. There's been so little research done on accessible bathrooms that the moment we look at it, a whole range of different issues begin to reveal. But we will be able to take some very constructive empirical evidence from the research and use that to promote for genuine change in the building standards within Australia.
We've also got, I think it's John Nugent, who's commented that some of the least accessible public locations are doctors' offices, X-ray dentists, hospital administrative areas. And if anything, people would have thought that they would have been the most cutting edge for having accessible facilities. Diane agreed with that.
Yeah, I agree with that too. That's so interesting, isn't it? We would think that they would have the most accessible settings, and often they don't. I also just like to respond to Kara's initial comment just about design, because having a background as a designer, so interesting that you mentioned how do you accommodate for such diversity of use with one design of a bathroom? And I think that's one of the big challenges that we'll eventually kind of have to face. I think what this project does is the very important first step is to say, all right, how are people using it? What is important? What are the different aspects that are important? And what we might find is, for example, you gave the example of toilet paper. We might find that there is a way of designing, a dispenser that has multiple access points. I mean, that's where, good design and more really targeted good design kind of comes into play. It's a little bit kind of further down the track from this particular kind of piece of research, but something that I'm really interested in too, Kara, like how do we, accommodate everyone's individual needs in one design?
Sid, I can also see that Liz has her hands up.
Yeah, hi. I'm from Albury, on the border of New South Wales, Victoria. I was involved, I had the fortune that I've been able to do what we call the toilet tour, in reviewing a bathroom that had just been designed on the river. Now, what we found was with the backs of the, how they, with that design that you've just done, looked at with the systems on the back of the wall, it is impossible for a lot of people to be able to have the strength to push those buttons in. We had there was I've got a high disability, and another lady that also had a high disability as well, and I was talking to the architects about this design, and what they have come up with is they were going to put systems in that of a stainless steel, and there's the new stainless steel they have found that's very strong and will withstand being wrecked. They were also going to put in, what they found was there is a high need for people that needed showers, and they were going to put hot and cold showers in. And what they were going to do was put all this design through the whole council for every new bathroom that they had built.
Thanks.
Automatic doors, which was the great, was really, a great asset for the whole community.
Liz, thank you. You mentioned the automatic doors, and Chris and Rochelle have also put some comments in. Chris Sparks says the accessible toilet doors on the brand new hospital at Bega weigh a ton and have no automatic functionality. And he's quite astounded that that is, in a new situation, something that's occurred. And Rochelle asked Sid whether you looked at the width of doors. There seems to be a range of widths, weights of doors, and opening sweep of doors.
Isn't there a 1428 standard?
Yes.
That also depends on the space of where the bathrooms are put, because you need a certain width for the doors to be able to slide open.
Correct. Liz, I'll pass back to Simon. I think he wants to comment on that one. Sorry.
Yeah, no, there's a number of comments. First off, there's some really cool innovations going on around, you know, the pressing of buttons and, you know, the combination of proximity sensors to buttons is already out there and available. Sometimes it becomes a cost issue. And that's also, you know, when they're looking in the short term, it comes back to inverted commas, compliance. What is the minimum rather than what is the maximum use of facility you'll get if it incorporates innovative design that gives you the independence and dignity of being able to get in and out of a toilet by yourself. I've recently been stuck, you know, in a facility that was a brand new design only a few years ago, and they made a conscious decision not to put in the auto opener doors. Now that's terrible for a major public facility. So there's a politics around it, and it certainly is fantastic that you know that the Albury Council is going to have a whole of area approach to putting in best practice rather than minimum standards. Thank you for those examples.
There obviously is the issue too of where the toilets are placed, and the fact that when you're traveling, being able to access a toilet, particularly if you need a changing place, and the detours that you might have to do, or the limited amount of time you can spend out in order to feel comfortable and find what you need.
Yes, and in our audit, we also found that a number of the accessible bathrooms were behind security doors where you couldn't actually get to them on particular floors. But I think just in response to the measuring door access widths, the benefit of the scanner is that it will capture those sorts of dimensions from the room once we've gone in and scanned the space. And we can then use the CAD system to interrogate individually those dimensions, but also all of the other dimensions within each individual bathroom setting.
I suppose the one thing we can't estimate within all of this is the weight of the door and the ability to open or close it physically.
You can certainly test what those forces are, and I think it's 19 newtons is supposed to be. But there's no doubt that the location does affect the ability to get the chair close enough. And somebody with my dexterity, it's almost impossible. You can either get it opened and then it closes on you, then you can't get back out, or not the other way. So there's a whole series of those issues about you know, getting in and getting out safely that become you know, quite serious for those that are involved in it. One other question about the particularly, and I know Chris Sparks has just done a tour from Bega up to Cairns and back. Being able to plan your trips and find accessible loos or stations that'll give you a hand if you need it. Filling petrol is one of those other ones that becomes critical to being able to travel in regional New South Wales or regional Victoria or anywhere else in the country as well. So that idea of having an updated version of the GIS for accessible loos in the country is also something that is of tremendous benefit, not only to us socially, but also to those areas economically if they want to get people to travel to them.
Vic's also mentioned in the chat, Sid, that architects have to attain CPD points, so professional development points, to stay registered every year. And this sort of research would be great for them to be able to do on that and get that experience and knowledge that they may not get normally. He's also said, can anyone help him if as he's doing a presentation to a group next week and wants to know about what the BCA doesn't tell you about being a wheelchair user. He's popped his email in the chat if anyone wants to reach out to him to assist. So my question, and I can't see any other hands, and I do apologize if you do have a hand up or I'm missing you, please let me know, just call out at this point in time. What's the next step, Sid? Are you going to take this and broaden your study, get more people, more areas? Will you take it to as Simon mentioned, obviously, minimum standards in terms of the building standards are just that, minimum. We're seeing that there's so much more needed. I was really interested to hear Philippa and hadn't really thought about the fact that many people want some sterile place that they can put their pieces of equipment, etc., that they need rather than in their chair. How do we design something that fits and will make that accessible and feasible for everybody and the different users? What's next on the agenda?
Well, I think the next thing on the agenda is to try and raise more public awareness and more professional awareness as to the issues that have been revealed from the study. And so it really is about provoking and educating the decision makers and the community in general to raise awareness of these kinds of issues. We'd very much like to expand and extend the research that we've done. And so we'll also, of course, be looking for some funding to support that process as well.
A couple more comments in the chat. One is, are hoists going to become a minimum standard? Will we see them in bathrooms?
Again, I'm not I don't sit on the standards committee, so I'm not an expert in the specifications side. I know that there's a current review and a new set of standards will be announced soon, but that's for the standards committee to determine.
Will this information go to them though, so they can see all the bits and pieces that have come out of this? And sorry, Simon, I didn't mean to talk over you.
No. Certainly, that's what we're doing, and of course with industry partners like Mark and Farah, who are deeply ingrained on those various committees. That will be one of the things that we're doing. But also, Diane's put up a very interesting comment around how do we go about prioritising critical services for our advocacy campaigns using the evidence that comes out of this project. So both all organisations that have got an advocacy role in this space, we're very happy to talk to and also formalise strategies moving forward. People know me, I've been around a while. I don't do research to get journal articles. I do research to get involved in getting social change, and that's that's the next complex part of the puzzle. And with your assistance, Diane, Serena, all the great policy officers that are there, we're happy to get together and brainstorm where we should be going, and more importantly too, how we do that and how we use the fantastic tech that Sid's brought into that as that, a little bit of a gee whiz to get those social media campaigns up and running.
A couple more notes in the chat for you. And Robin, thank you. She says she sits on the standards and she's here. So great to have someone listening in that can feed back directly as well. John Nugent also said it should be also good to recognise some of the good work, and obviously some of the major shopping centres are starting to provide reasonable toilet accessibility. Macquarie in Sydney and New South Wales, for one, in his opinion. Again, I guess that depends, John, on what you need and what's in place, but absolutely. More questions?
I was just going to jump in and ask one quickly, if that's all right.
You may.
Sure. So what's the full name of the standards committee that we're referring to?
So it's the Australian Building Standards that we're talking about, and the standards, and Robin, you might want to clarify specifically if you like. Save me.
The whole group of standards is called AS 1428. And there are currently, they're not all called up into the building code. So that's one issue in itself. And it's the access and mobility for new building work. And so the thing that I'm sitting here worrying about as well is that those toilets that are new and that, for example, don't have compliant clear door openings should have been signed off by a building certifier or an access consultant. And that obviously isn't happening as well. So we've got a whole follow-on of issues that are happening here. And the other problem, which we started at the beginning, is that standard, which was based on very old research, didn't actually even include people who use electric wheelchairs. It's only for manual wheelchairs. And so, it excluded a huge number of people. And the reason why we haven't been able to change that is because we haven't had the research. So I think this is really key, because we are doing, it's a challenge to convince the building industry that they need to pay for and include, for example, automated doors. That's anything that's involves cost is always a battle. But if we've got the research to actually say that's what you need, then we've got a much stronger voice, because it is a challenge.
Thank you, Robin. I do understand that. I just wanted to make one point. Obviously, building accessible toilets or anything accessible does involve a cost. But as we've seen, if the cost is being spent, even if it's not meeting the needs. So I think the money would be more well spent and get more quality out of the money long term if it actually met the needs of the consumer.
Oh, I don't disagree in any way, shape or form. I mean, the huge issue at the moment, for example, is that trying to get just minimum access into residential buildings here in New South Wales has been rejected on the grounds of cost, which we have actual research that proves that that's not correct, but that's what's happened. So, unfortunately, everybody needs to speak up. It's really important that, it's not just seen as a minority issue, and, we have to comply with the Disability Discrimination Act as well. Those things are just being pushed to one side. So, the idea of promoting the issue I think is great. I think it's really important. We need to be more. I mean, I think it's hard when, you can't easily just use a basic toilet. And then we're asking you to stand up and promote that issue. But I think that seems to me there's little option, really.
Absolutely. Thanks, Robin, and thanks for clarifying. And you're absolutely right. The fact that we can't get New South Wales, the largest state in the country, to accept minimum silver livable design standards is absolutely frightening, and something that a number of our organisations are working on every single day at the moment. Not having much luck, but we're working hard. And there'll be a parliamentary forum next week to actually talk to the broader issues as well as the NCC guidelines, but many of the housing issues for people who live in New South Wales all over. So everyone, I'm aware that we're just over time. I don't think there's any other hands up, and if I've missed you, I do apologise. There's a few more things in the chat that I'll make sure are captured and given to the research team so it can be put with all the other research as well. And at this time, I'll take the time to say thank you everyone for attending and for your time. Once we finish, we will, as we said, have a recording that we can send out to you, and you can pass that on to others if they're interested. And I'm pretty sure the UTS team will be keen to link with people moving forwards to tell you about next steps if they are looking to engage with people further. So by all means, we have most of your email addresses, and we'll reach out and let you know if there's more to come. And if you'd like to be a part, we'd greatly welcome your involvement. So thank you to the UTS team, to the SCIA team, and to everyone online. I appreciate your time and efforts.